Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining tonight. Welcome to our conversation. I'm so glad that you all decided to tune in. We have the honor of hearing from Carol and Denise Juneau tonight, a mother-daughter duo whose leadership has shaped Montana and inspired so many people across many states. They're here to share their journey, the role of family in public service, and what it truly means to lead as a Native woman. We're in for a wonderful conversation tonight. A little bit of an introduction about who we are. My name is Lexi Locklear. I am lumpy. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm from North Carolina. Before I properly introduce our guests, I would just like to share a little bit about Advance's work, as we always do before we start these Facebook Lives. Advance Native Political Leadership, or more commonly known as Advance, is the first and only Native-led organization dedicated to building political power in Native communities nationally. We take a holistic approach to create an ecosystem that focuses on leadership recruitment, support, civic engagement, data and research, and national coordination. We truly believe that when Native peoples and communities have access to a national network, innovative tools for organizing, strong voter engagement strategies, and different pathways to leadership, we strengthen the health and well-being of all of our communities. Native political engagement has been deeply limited by historical, legal, and modern barriers, and this is especially true for Native women. Because of these barriers, Native peoples remain drastically underrepresented in government at every level. At Advance, we are committed to creating opportunities for leadership development, community connection, and visibility for Native leaders at any level. We're working to build power through leadership representation so that Native voices are heard at every level of decision making. And two great guests that we have to help lead this conversation a little bit deeper. I'm going to introduce them a little bit individually, just a little bit of their background. Denise Juneau has seen firsthand how strong social policies and quality services can transform resilient communities. Her career has focused on fighting educational injustice, expanding opportunities for underserved populations, and challenging systemic inequality. Inspired by a family dedicated to public service, Denise taught in a rural reservation school, earned a law degree to advocate for tribes, and spent over a decade as a national education leader and superintendent. She has achieved many historic firsts: the first Native woman elected to statewide office in Montana, the first Native superintendent of Seattle Public Schools, and Montana's first openly LGBTQ and federal candidate. Denise is a citizen of the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Blackfeet tribes. Thank you, Denise, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
And right next to her, we have her mother, Carol Juneau. Carol, one of 10 children, grew up on the Berthold Reservation in North Dakota. She's a proud mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. For over 80 years, she has championed education, equity, and justice, starting by helping at-risk students and later leading the creation of Blackfeet Community College. During her 12 years in the Montana Legislature, she helped pass landmark bills like the Indian Education for All and remove derogatory place names. A lifelong advocate for Native political power, she has served in leadership roles from the Montana Democratic Party to Western Native Voice Board and co-founded Carol's List to support Democratic women candidates. Through it all, Carol has stayed grounded in family, community, and the belief that education opens doors. Denise, Carol, thank you both for joining us tonight again. You have both paved the way in remarkable ways in your journeys. Denise as the first Native woman elected to statewide exec office, and Carol through your decades of leadership in education and public service. To open our conversation tonight, could you both just share a little bit about your journey into leadership? What inspired you to get involved with civic engagement and policy?
Go ahead, do it. Okay. One of the things I was looking at your questions and that one I was a young woman married with two kids back in the 60s, and the 1960s and early 70s was quite a change year. There was a lot of change going on in America, and the people of color were fighting for their civil rights and voting. They were fighting for their rights in education and employment. And then along with that, also the American Indian movement was active in the rights of tribes and as sovereign nations. And my husband Stan and I were students in Billings, Montana, and got involved at that level. And I think those early years and the advocacy of Indians and their for their who they are and their rights to exist and have equity, just really gave me a lot of encouragement to do what I did and work towards what I did.
I think, I grew up in a family that was very civically engaged, and we were all involved with the school system. They were engaged in community affairs. They did a lot of different meetings. I grew up going to places where my mom and dad were registering people to vote all the time. Like, they carried around voter registration cards. They thought that was really the pathway to making sure your voice got heard. And so I grew up really civically engaged and making sure that people in community were able to figure out a pathway to get their voice heard and make sure that elected people were held accountable to the actions and the votes that they took. And then, of course, when I saw my mom run for office and become a state legislator, and to see the things that were able to be accomplished when you're sitting in those seats that get to vote, that was super powerful. Mm-hmm. And the ability to pass those bills that you talked about, Indian Education for All, to get money for schools for Indian Education for All, to remove derogatory place names from our maps, to work with tribes and make sure that their voices were heard at the state legislature, really showed, I think, the through line and what was common among all Montanans, and how people really needed to pay attention to Indian people at all levels. And so that really, seeing that happen and seeing what could happen by being in an elected office, through my mom's service and my dad. My dad was on the tribal council for a while, and we had come from a long family of people being engaged in office and civic engagement. And so I think just that history and being able to see what could be accomplished really spurred me to be inspired to run from office myself.
Thank y'all for sharing that. Carol, Denise spoke a little bit about how you shaped her journey into leadership, but what has it meant for you to be able to watch Denise step into and expand that path that you created?
It's been pretty good. It's been great. I've enjoyed helping her with some of her campaigns and some of her work, and very proud of her, very proud of what she's done and what she's accomplished in terms of leadership in Montana, and particularly in education. I guess I think that's a very strong value for me, is the education of natives, and doing as much as we can to make sure that kids graduate from high school and continue on. Native kids graduate from high school and continue on. But it's also one of the things that happens now with Denise and her achievements, is when I go to various activities or introduce myself to someone, and one of my things that I can say, I'm Denise's mom. And that does, they all know Denise, or most people know Denise here in Montana. And so that always gives me a great sense of pride to be able to say that I'm her parent.
I grew up being Carol Juneau's daughter, so there was a big shift that happened. So it's like, it really took a turn when I ran for statewide office, but that's how I grew up. It's like, oh, do you know Carol Juneau? I was like, she's my mom.
That is awesome. So we created this Facebook Live a little bit, Denise, because you are quoted in a report that we recently released, Native Leaders in Focus. This report was about exploring the impacts of messaging, highlighting Native leadership, specifically within our Native communities. So Advance partnered with Grow Progress to survey over 800 Native American and Alaska Native adults and better understand what Native peoples believe about participation in the US political system. The research found that Native women in particular are inspired by seeing other Native women in leadership positions. How have you seen the impact of role models and visibility, specifically in women, in your own lives and communities?
Yeah, I would just say, well, first, thank you all for doing that research. I think it's really important that we sort of get a handle on what Native people are thinking about elected office and policies that impact them. And so I really appreciate Advance sort of really digging in and finding out what people, and what particularly Native people, are thinking, so that we can build upon that foundation. And so that's really appreciated. I think as far as women being in office or in really high levels of leadership, you can look to Deb Haaland. I always think back to Eloise Cabell and her long fight. I think of early legislators, women legislators like my mom, and just all those trailblazers who really forged a path for everybody who came after. I mean, there's just like, you could talk about Ada Deer, you could talk about all kinds of different women who really got engaged over the arc of history to speak out for Native issues and Native people. And so, there is a long line of Native women that we all stand on their shoulders today and take action. And I think when we see Native women in those positions, we know it's possible, right? It's sort of like when, people step into those positions of power, it takes a lot. Like it takes a lot of giving up your personal lives and giving up a lot of your privacy. But, there's something that compels you to sort of step into those positions because it's important. And so when women step into those positions, I think it's something you can see yourself and know that that it's possible to be able to be in those positions. And then you see sort of the actions that they take and how they're fierce and they're strong for everybody. And, talk a lot about Eloise Cabell and her leadership and her ability to fight the federal government for 15 years and not give up and to be successful in the end. And so it just, it's a long line of people, but super important to be able to see yourself in all the places.
Native women in Montana, Native women throughout the United States, I think have really led the way in many cases in leadership and in political involvement. And some of the women that Denise talked about, Eloise is one of my heroes, and in what she accomplished and what she did, not only for people of Montana, but people of the Indian people throughout the United States and tribes. And she's still impacting them with their buyback programs and with scholarships for students. But so I think, and then Native women have always kind of stepped forward. I always say that sometimes something's going on, or we want to start a project, or we need help with certain things. And they'll say, well, who should we ask? And then you start naming off people that you think might step forward and help. And often it's Native women from, let's call, Anna from Salish Kootenai. Let's give a call to Margie from Fort Belknap, or the different reservation communities. And Janine Pease from Crow. Those are Native women that have always stood strong and, accomplished so much. And, are role models for me, hopefully for a lot of people. One of the things, so I think too, and even now, I think you can see the results of a lot of that. There's a lot of young Native women taking leadership roles in various capacities, politics, organizations, and it's so good to see that. I go to meetings once in a while and I look around and there might be 3 or 4 young Native women that are leading various groups. And I went to a meeting at the University of Montana recently and working on Eloise Cabell Day. And I'll look around the room, and a lot of Native women have different key positions at the university, and it's so cool. I really appreciate that. And I think that's just something that we need to continue and honor Native women for that role.
And I think it's sort of like, I think Native women have always been leaders way back when. I mean, it's a matrilineal sort of culture, and, the ability to step in and play a role and to make sure that the tribe advances and that your family is a part of that and everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. I mean, I think those leadership roles have always been present. And, in the modern day where we are, it is in all these areas. I think of, Native fashion, acting, in every category now are Native people. And in many of those places, Native women are leading. And so I think that's a significant view. I mean, to be able to see that across the spectrum is really pretty awesome.
I know one of the things you asked, I think, or in one of the questions that you might ask is who were some of your role models? And I did want to share that. I think my large family, I had 3 sisters, and they were role models for me in what they did, not in politics or things, but just in how they lived their lives and what they, they worked hard. And so I said they were my, first and forever role models. So that's good.
I completely relate to that. My younger sister, I admire her so much, and I always say that she's my role model. I try to take her in a lot of places in my life.
Yeah, I mean, there's places, right? Like you can, like there's a special bond when you gather with other women that is just like it's inexplicable, like in a way, but there is something when Native women gather and how they interact and how they support each other and the things that can be accomplished is just really important.
And we need to make them all run for office.
Yes.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yes.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us into our next question. So that's a great segue. We know that Native women are more likely to run for office when they see that represented in places before them. But for many, something that keeps coming up as a barrier is like being a mother and still having a family connection while being on a campaign trail or like running for office or being in elected office. How has parenting shaped the way that you lead, and in what ways can family and community actually become sources of strength instead of a barrier for Native leaders stepping into these spaces?
My involvement in politics or running for office happened after my kids, were growing up, and so they became, helpers for my campaigns. They helped me with putting up voter signs. They helped me with passing out literature and attending events and all of those things that you need when you're running for office. And so I think that, and one of the things I think parents can do, though, you have children, take them with you to your meetings. Take your children to, maybe there's some activity going on. I know I used to take my children with me to various events that I went to. And so they knew that I was going to something that was important to me, that they could be a part of it. And I've taken my grandchildren to various events and where they can see what we're doing. They can participate and they know that they belong in that environment. And so I think that's important, to share your life with your kids and share your life with your grandchildren, so that they can be a part of it and they know it's important to you as your parent, as their parent. And so it's vital. It's something that I think, but it's hard for, we were just talking about that the other day. It's hard for young parents to run for political office because they have so many, responsibilities for their kids in school, or they've got a job they can't leave because they're supporting their family. So those are things, complications or challenges that young families have to face, and particularly women have to face if they have a family they're responsible for. And so those are things that we have to figure out some way to overcome that so they can participate as leaders.
Yeah, and I think, I think the thing is we need to rightfully take our place, like in everywhere we can be. And it is like making sure that they stay engaged. And I mean, we have to shift it a bit about I would say there's no more important person that should be in elected office than a parent, a mother, because they have so much at stake, right? They are raising the next generation. They know what pathway they want to see forged. And so we really do need to figure out a way to help make room for their voices to be in the state legislatures and elected office and city councils and school boards. And because I think they have more at stake than anyone, really.
So that's one of the things sometimes in elected bodies, the U.S. Congress or state legislatures, you see a lot of senior citizens sitting in those seats and making decisions. And we really do need, as Denise said, young people sitting in those seats, helping, because they know what's needed. And they know what would make their life better. They know what's going to make their children's lives better. And so we do need to figure our some support for them to help them get run for office and help them get elected.
That's something that we at Advance have been interested in, and there are other organizations that are, like Vote Mama for one, that are doing great work and great research on this topic. So hopefully that it can, well, I know we're gonna continue to see it increase. Moving more into a little bit more of the report. So one key finding that our team found is that 73% of Native respondents believe that the US government would do a better job if there were more Native electeds in office. Do you see this reflected in your own experience?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, well, first we can talk about Deb Haaland when she was Secretary of Interior and what she was able to do for tribes. And, you know, she took the lessons from Montana of removing derogatory names and took it nationally. You know, there are all these things that she was able to accomplish because she had a certain viewpoint of being a tribal person and a tribal woman. That she was able to bring that perspective to a very high-ranking office and navigate it in a way that she was able to really speak for tribes and to make sure that we were getting things done at a national level for tribes. I think the same thing comes down when I was, you know, I spoke earlier about watching my mom in the state legislature and pass Indian Education for All. If Native people are not in those seats, people don't think of Native people, right? They just like, if you're not there to be represented and you're not standing up in the halls of power to speak truth to power, they don't think about it. And so it's so important to be in those seats. And once you're there, you know, there's almost like this double or triple burden where you have to be, as the Native person in the room, an educator of non-natives, of what Native issues are, what is tribal sovereignty, and how do you actually talk about it? And, you know, how do you make sure that when you're pushing a policy that people really understand the impact on tribal lands and reservations and tribal people? So there's this extra layer of, I guess, a burden of sorts that you have to take that and be an educator on top of trying to get policy passed. However, when you can do that and you can really push the envelope in those spaces, like things get done. And once people understand how important it is and how vital it is, not just to Native people, but for everybody, that's when really good policy gets passed.
You know, the United States has got a special relationship with Indian country, with Indian tribes through, you know, a long history of treaties and all the various things that came after that. And so I think the United States government has a responsibility to Indian country, and they make policy. They determine, the United States Congress determines where that money is going to go, whether it's, you know, and tribes and their representatives and somebody sitting in those seats helping push that green button of yes is really, really important. So if you take like the Appropriations Committee of the US government or of the House, if there is not anybody sitting in those seats being able to share some of the history, being able to share why do tribes need this money, why are tribal colleges important, what's Indian Health Service about, don't they get, you know, everything? But we need Indian people sitting in, you know, not only our state legislators, but in US Congress. And I mean, we've been successful. I think we've got little efforts going here and there. We've got we did have two Congress, and now we have one. But I think that needs to grow. You know, national representation needs to grow. We're way behind in that, in terms of representation of Native people. But there is a responsibility of the US government to honor their treaties. And it's important that we're there, and it's to remind them of it.
Keep them accountable. I like that. We talked about federal positions and how important it is that we're seen on that national level. But can y'all speak more about to like the state and local levels? respondents from the report said that they agreed that Native leaders should not only seek tribal office, but also run for state and local elected offices too. What are your opinions on that?
Oh, I think absolutely. I would agree with your respondents in that research, and continued research is needed for those things, because I do think leadership, say in Montana, I do think Native leadership is needed in county government. I think is needed in city governments. I think it's needed in school boards who set the policy. All of those groups have the authority to make the laws for that whatever area they represent, but they also control the budget strings. Where do you want that money spent? And so much of this political involvement is about resources being allocated to people's needs and what's important. And so it is important for us to have good representation in all levels of government. I think, as an example, I think Missoula, which is an urban community in Montana where we live, has a Native American woman as what chairman of the school board. It's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Albuquerque visiting my sister Dorothy, and there was a Native woman running for school board in Albuquerque, where there is a whole group of Native people living there. First Native woman first Native woman elected to the school board, which was a great accomplishment, but also saying, why has it taken so long for that to happen? I said there should have been the Native voice on that school board for many, many years. But so little things like that. And but the main thing is we need those seats. When you're sitting at a seat and voting, you have power, and we need that power, throughout all the various levels of government that impact us. Say, for example, healthcare, which is important to me and to people of my age. What's going to happen to Medicare? What's going to happen to Medicaid? What's going to happen to, what did they call it, the marketplace?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm hoping that people, of my age are going to be willing to represent me and share my voice. And I think Natives need to be a part of that so that they have adequate health care for themselves and for their families.
Yeah, I would say in Montana, like we have 12 Native legislators now, which is really awesome. And it took a lot of hard work to get there. But when they're there, they're a powerful bloc.
Yep.
Like
Mhm.
they have so much power in that legislative arena, just as a result of their sheer numbers. And so they're able to get some things done. And, that's pretty exciting. And then I think, beyond even elected office, if we're talking about, consultation, tribal consultation, like who does that? And how do people learn about it? How do we make sure state agencies and federal agencies are doing their job of working with tribes and getting their voices in and asking them the right questions so that the policy that gets created is conducive to being able to be carried out? And so I think there's just really still a long ways to go. But if we don't have Native people in all of those spaces, it really makes it difficult.
Mhm.
One, because the voice isn't there, and two, it's easily to put to the side.
Mhm. So,
Both of you have navigated leadership in those non-tribal government spaces. Were there any barriers that you've encountered in your own experience, whether that's barriers to entry, barriers while you're in office?
I think, just I can speak to like when I first ran for state superintendent, I'd been working, as a teacher, and then I worked at the state education agency in Native education for several years. And when I stepped out to run for the top office, people try to pigeonhole you, right? Of like, well, you grew up in Browning, you're from the Blackfeet Reservation, you're an enrolled member of a tribe, you spent most of your career in Native education. Can you be the superintendent for all? Or can you just be, or will you just be the superintendent for Native people? And so there's that additional, people want to stereotype you, they want to pigeonhole you, they want to box you into an idea of who you are, and you really have to work to get yourself out of it. And that really, I think when I first stepped into a campaign mode, that was really a big barrier for me. And it was kind of surprising. Like I did not expect that. Until I got into it. And of course, you know, I had a 4-way primary at that time and was able to break through that just by talking to a lot of people and say, well, of course. And, you know, if you know tribal law and you know Native education and you know about Native things, you are triple as smart as anybody else because that's an additional layer of knowledge that you have. And so that was a barrier that I was able to sort of break out of and say, of course, I'm going to be the superintendent for all, but my experience really is steeped in Native education, and that's actually a good thing. It's a plus.
I think some of the barriers that I faced was similar to why do you need this special educational program for American Indians or in Montana, particularly on Indian Education for All? It's in our Constitution. We have one of the strongest constitutions in our state that particularly reflects American Indian education in its educational clause. And but to get over that line and be able to educate my colleagues on the floor of the House or the floor of the Senate of why that bill was important to us and important to all of Montana to educate and to talk and to prepare. So you do have to really have a good information and research and data to indicate why you need certain bills passed. I've actually faced some real strong criticism from various individuals when I was working on the bill to change take the name of Squaw off of our land sites and rivers and our mountains. And a few people weren't very happy about that in our state. And so I said, those are things that you just have to kind of accept and move on. But and I found in terms of, I think, working as a legislator, when I was in the legislature, there was only 4 of us, I think, 4 natives. And now there's 12. It would have been wonderful to have 12, but there were 4 of us. So we were kind of unique, and there we were. But I found creating allies was important to me. And the women, the Democratic women, formed the Democratic caucus, and I was an active part of that, and that was really helpful to me. They supported me in my efforts. I supported, many of them in their efforts at various bills that they had, but I found really strength in other women in the state legislature and helping me get over barriers that I faced, or helping me answer questions, or wondering, how do I do this, or what should I do and what should I say when I'm presenting various policy. But so it's important for us to reach out to various groups and probably other women that really, really supported us in activities. So
yeah, I think it's just that kind of thing. It's like it's important to find mentors in your space and rely on them to a supportive shoulder, advice, thought partners, and to really have people in your corner that you can trust.
And that is Advance's philosophy for why we are trying to create this national network, because we need people to rely on. We should have
important.
Native campaign managers, Native elected officials at every office. Both of you have been longtime advocates for civic engagement among Native people, and many of the respondents on this report also said that they would be more likely to vote if they saw Native candidates across the ballot, regardless of office. Why do you think that Native leadership is such a motivator for voter participation?
One of the things I was looking at that, and I'll share just a thought with you on, when I go to some activity, say, and it's a large meeting, and I'm new to it, or I'm not, haven't been there before, one of the first things I do is kind of look around and look around the room and see if I see another Native, and or is there, where who they are. If I see somebody I recognize from my home community, and I feel a little sense of comfort knowing that there's another Native person that I can maybe go sit with or participate with and things like that. So it's important that they give you comfort in knowing that there's someone like you, I guess, with probably similar values, similar background, that you can share and learn from and be a part of and be a partner with. I think that's the same in voting. So if I go to vote, one of the first thing I want to know, are there any of those candidates that I know? If there's a Native candidate listed on that ballot, I think Indian people are more likely, to go and participate, register and vote if they know somebody's running for office or going to be on that ballot that they can help. And it's just the connection that you make, and I guess you trust them a little bit more. And so, but it's important. Yeah.
And I guess I would just speak to like when I stepped up to run for Congress or even state superintendent, like when people see you like traveling around the state and just having young people, like when you're talking to them, like be excited about voting and registering to vote because you're on the ballot, right? There's a Native person on the ballot that has a similar lived experience as me, that grew up on a reservation, that understands how that all works. And then to be running for such a large office. I mean, I ran into a 75-year-old woman who registered to vote for the very first time because I was on the ballot. I talked to young Native women who said, how do I become engaged and become like you? And so I just like, not that I'm just like this awesome thing, but it's sort of like they were excited because they had somebody who was like them on the ballot and they had not seen that before. And so I think that really is the excitement, and it does help people to really get engaged and think about, what does this position do for my community and why is it important, and why is this person running for that office and what are they going to bring to that? And so it just brings a whole different level of thought where they might not have thought about it before. And so I think that was pretty significant, and it was it was an awesome responsibility is what I would say when you're in that spot of carrying that history and the paving the road and doing all those things. And I can think about like when Deb Haaland and Sharice Davids both got elected, the first Native women to Congress, like I was crying that night. Like that was a huge deal to finally break through that kind of ceiling and reach that pinnacle of leadership is just huge. And so when you see, when I saw those two Native women, embrace each other, and you understand the history of that and how hard that must have been for them to reach that level of politics and sitting in those seats. I mean, it was just, I think, really, that was something. Yeah. And so it's just like, it's something to everybody and every Native person who's watching that. And so, and I understand what their responsibility is and how heavy that must have been, but how exciting that also was for all of Indian country that day.
I mean, to see them come into the Congress, with their native wear on, it's just the feelings inside you as a woman, as a Native woman, to know that they're going to represent you. You really connected with them. And it was a emotional time, I think, for me, emotional time for Denise, emotional time for many Native people throughout the United States. It was just, congratulations to them. I said they led the road, you know.
Continuing to pave the way. That's beautiful. A lot of y'all have been closely connected to the work of Western Native Voice in Montana, which has played such an important role in building Native civic engagement in the state. From your perspective, what makes Montana unique when it comes to Native political participation, and how can folks in the state get more involved?
Well, you were a founding member, so
Western Native Voice was organized a number of years ago, and to continue a lot of the work that various groups have done for a number of years in Montana. But they wanted to provide a vehicle that would be year-round and working, because most of the organizations that I helped with before Western Native Voice were kind of like organized during the election period. We'd get busy and we'd register voters, and then we'd work on get out the vote activities, and then when the elections were done, we were done, kind of. But Western Native Voice, I think, had a new vision of, we need an organization that will work to get Native people in Montana not only registered to vote but participate in and the political system, understand the political system more, understand that they can be a part of that, and also in helping identify candidates and providing leadership opportunities for those particular candidates on reservation and off reservation. And so I think they've made great strides over the years in people recognizing them as a group that will provide information if they want to run for office. If you've got an interest in being a legislator, or if you've got interest being, a school board member, I think you can contact Western Native Voice and they'll help. They go out to communities and provide leadership training for people. It's become a nice, well-recognized organization in the state that has helped create and build political participation by Indian people in our state. And so it's nice. And I said to have 12, and we've talked about it, but I think Montana is unique in that we have 12 Native Americans in our state legislature, and we're I think either at equity or above equity in terms of representation in our numbers, and that's unusual. And one of the things that I think is really outstanding in all of it is we have Indians representing urban communities now. And that's something that in our work, we often look just to reservation communities or tribal governments, but about half of the Indian people live off reservation in our urban areas. And that's an area we can't forget. We can't forget that we need representation from those urban areas that will speak and carry the voice of Natives that live in those urban areas and their other constituents as well. And we need Native representation in those urban areas on local government systems. So I think those are important things that are happening here in Montana. I'm not certain about other states where their state legislators come from, and if they're representing Natives at an equitable level or from their urban communities. But I do think Native Americans that live in our urban areas, their voice needs to be heard a little stronger.
I would just say, so speaking to Montana too, is when we look at our electoral politics, like people had to take things to court and be willing to, speak out and say, our county commission has never had a Native person there encompass a reservation right up on Fort Belknap with Dolores Plumage, who took them to court and said, we need to do this differently. There's been school boards down in Crow Reservation that had to sue to get Native representation on the school board. And so it's been the ability, and mostly Native women, who've seen that there are these injustices that are happening in elected office and have been willing to step up and say, we're taking us to court, you're doing it wrong, we need our own voices on these elected bodies because you all are representing us. And so we need somebody there that's going to actually, have our lived experience and be able to speak from a place of knowing. And so we've also had a lot of those types of efforts that have happened. And then they win. And so then we get Native representation and then you win. So I think, you know, there's a long history of people stepping up and saying, there's an injustice, this is how we fix it. And then they find people to step into those seats. And that's happened with our state legislature too, is that there's had to be a lot of fights around getting there. But Western Native Voice also helps with that. They take people to court and they're not afraid of doing that so that we can get the representation that we deserve.
And I think they have a lobbyist now in DC. So I said, I mean, that's a big step. That's nice. And but I said, yeah, the work that has been done in Montana, I said, having 12 Native American legislators, it has a long history. Has a long history of that, and most of it legal history, using the Voting Rights Act and suing and seeking adequate representation and trying to draw boundaries for voting districts where Native Americans within that voting district would have a better choice of who they vote for. And that took time to go to court. And we were successful, you know, over the years in creating 6 Indian majority House districts and 3 Indian majority Senate districts through both legal action and through the state's, what they call it, the Redistricting and Reapportionment Commission, and who work on drawing boundaries every 10 years. But and all of those efforts took individual Native people to join the lawsuits, to go to those meetings, to be representative, to share their voice, and take the challenge. And Denise said, and win. You can win. And so I said, I'm sure legal issues will continue, you know, to be a part of it as we grow in politics and representation. But we've got a stronger voice here because of all of that.
I completely agree. Montana has such a powerful history when it comes to civic engagement, voter participation. And I just want to thank you both for the contributions you made to that impactful legacy. Like, it is amazing. And the fact that y'all are still doing work regardless of where you're at, that is amazing. And I just thank you for that and for your contributions. We've talked a lot and heard a lot of great, insightful knowledge that you all shared, but is there any specific advice that you would give to the next generation of Native leaders who are thinking about stepping into public office?
Particular advice, I would say that if you have a little interest in being engaged in the political system, at whatever level, I think you should just do it. I mean, it's hard to open that door and go in and take a seat and be a part of something that maybe is new to you. You might be a little uncomfortable in it, but do it. Sit in the front row. I always tell women, particularly when you go into a meeting, sit down in the front row and don't sit way in the back. You know, be a part of it. Stand up when they ask if there's questions, and ask questions and be a part of it. But also join various groups. You know, I started with the in Glacier County, and I was on the Blackfeet Reservation, raising my family there. I started with the local Democratic Central Committee and joined them and worked at that level, and did voter registration and get out the vote projects for many years, and joined the state Democratic Party system and helped with that. And so I said, you do have to, I think, take those steps where people get to know who you are. And also you can see if those groups will represent you, and you can, and then they'll help you. You know, when it's your turn to step up and say, you know, I'd like to run for office, or I'd like to be a part of this, or so.
Yeah, I would say join things. Go to these central committee meetings, go to some organization that's organizing some kind of community event. And yeah, you have to go and you have to get to know people. And speak out. I mean, so I guess, you know, one of the pieces of advice that I remember my mom either telling me or somebody was, go to the meeting. Like, don't wait to be invited to the meeting. If you care and are passionate about an issue, find out who's doing things around that issue and go. And don't wait to be invited. Get into the room, take the front seat. And if there's a table, then, you know, take a seat around that table. And if there's not a chair for you, then find one and bring it to the table. You know, you kind of have to be bold and courageous. And it's really a scary place sometimes, but it's important that you're there. And if you're not there, then who's going to be there, right? It's sort of like find an issue you're passionate about, get engaged in it, get knowledgeable about it, and then take your seat where you deserve to be there.
And it might be something like, you know, for a young family, like childcare. So maybe, you know, they're having trouble finding childcare for their children, or it's so expensive. You know, maybe you join a group that's working on laws that might help with that, or it might be housing or education, or just whatever it is. Find something that is interesting to you, or you think that you have some ideas that would make things better, and take that step, that scary step, and you'll find that people probably
they'll be happier there.
They're going to say, "Good, welcome." They'll welcome you, to it.
Thank y'all so much for sharing. One last question to close us out. When you think back on your journey, just in life, this doesn't have to be political. What's one piece of advice from your mother or from your daughter that has stuck with you the most?
Well, I think I just said, like, take your space. And I just recently went somewhere and can't remember, it was some sort of like really big political event, and I was doing an introduction of somebody, and it's still scary. Like, even though through all my experience, like, I still get nervous. I still, you know, get the heart palpitations and figure out like what I'm doing. And she texted me and said, "You deserve to be there. You have a long history. Your aunts, you know, forged a path. You just come from a long line of strong Native women, and you deserve to be there." And that just really, I was like, yeah, actually, I do deserve to be here. We all deserve to be in all those spaces. And so I think that was a really nice way to push me forward and to make sure that, you know, I knew that I belonged there. And I think that is really something that helped me.
I think one of the things that right now, in this time of my life, I said, one of the things I said, Denise always gives me advice. She'll say, "Okay, what did you find joy in today?" You know, like, make sure your days are filled with, you know, something that you enjoy doing, and that you work towards that, and that you take care of yourself, and find, you know, you have to, I guess, make sure that you're doing okay yourself, and that you have things to do, hobbies to have. And I know she's always asking me, you know, "Did you walk today? Did you?" But things. So it's good, you know,
and drink water.
Yeah, that's her new that's her new advice for me. But yeah, I think it's been good. Yeah, I appreciate. I live here in Missoula, where Denise also lives, and it's nice having her around.
You always gave me goosebumps with that one, so that's a great way to end our conversation. Thank y'all so much for joining us and for having such a great discussion with us. Your time was so valuable, and so thank you for spending it with us. And thank you to everyone else for joining us this evening. And if this conversation has inspired you at all, like Denise and Carol said, sign up for stuff. So apply for NLI. You can find more about our Native Leadership Institute on our website. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram. We have an X account for more information about events coming up. But you can also you can always check our website for applications for NLI and training dates.
Yeah. Thanks for all you're doing, and everybody sign up. So
yes,
good.
Thanks.
It's important.
Thanks for and good luck with your work.
Of course. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.